Influence of socio-cultural conventions can also be observed in the writings produced by users of English from different circles. The writings which are produced by users of English from different parts of the world using different varieties of English differ in the use of rhetorical strategies. Now, what is a rhetorical strategy? Rhetorical strategy are the techniques or strategies that writers use to produce appropriate and effective language in any situation. And rhetorical devices can be used not only by writers but also by speakers. So the strategies you use, the appropriate strategies that you use to use language effectively, to convey your message effectively and appropriately. We see that different varieties of English show a noticeable difference in the rhetorical strategies that you use in writing. The selection of a rhetorical strategy completely depends on the socio-cultural conventions of the use of language and also the appropriateness of a certain kind of language in a particular socio-cultural context. So some features of the expanding or outer circle writing is that users of language from this part of the world use high sounding words. They have a very high sounding style, and they often use flowery language and high sounding words. Also, they will not express themselves directly. They would always tend to be a little careful and use a lot of indirectness in expressing their views, making a request, asking a question, etc. And then the writing of the outer and expanding circle is also accused of being too wordy, that they use a lot of words. And the reason is the writers from outer and expanding circle countries, they tend to present all sides of the argument. They do not come directly to the point, straight to the point, but would present all sides of the argument and then say what their point of view is. Another feature of the writing of second language users of English or users of English from the expanding circle is that they use extensive quotations from previous work, and it is more true for academic work and for student writing, etc. So they use a lot of quotations, citations from previous work. Similarly, the writing also differs in the use of politeness strategies. One strategy that these users from the outer circle of English or expanding circle of English use is that they do not make a request directly. For example, when writing a letter, writing an application, and they need to make a request, the request will be prefaced by some general observations. And therefore, we have such samples of writing from the outer expanding circle English language writers. So after talking about other things, the person would come to the point if they are making a request in writing. So now coming to the crux of the matter, which means the person had been talking about other things before coming to the main purpose of the letter. Similarly, the writers from this part of the world, from South Asia and other outer and expanding circle countries, they tend to use a lot of affective elements. For example, they would make it very emotional, use a lot of words, phrases, etc., which add a lot of emotion, sentiment to their writing. So we may have read such letters ourselves where writers would make statements like, I request you very humbly to enlighten me of the following points. Although it could have simply been said, I would appreciate it if you could give me information about the following points. But, and these are samples from real writing. So, I request you very humbly to enlighten me. So, we have a combination of affective elements and also this high sounding word enlighten. Similarly, let's take a look at the second example, and please note with folded hands. Like we say in Urdu, हाथ बांध के अर्ज करता हूँ या करती हूँ. They have translated it in English, although such a phrase is not used in English. So, with folded hands, I request you to. So again, this is a little too emotional. The literature which is produced in the outer and expanding circle countries in English, the writers have successfully shown a synthesis, an assimilation of conventions or rhetorical strategies from the West and of socio-cultural conventions from outer and expanding circle languages and writing. So we see a synthesis of oral and writing traditions and also of strategies to attract the audience, the readers, in the writings of writers from the outer and expanding circle countries, Asian and African countries who write in English. So they show a very interesting and very powerful combination of a mix of these oral and written traditions from the Asian and African cultures and also from the native English cultures. The inner circle writing has certain characteristics which are very different from the outer and expanding circle writing. For example, the inner circle users would use direct imperatives. The requests or the questions, the orders will not be made indirectly. And there's also a lot of emphasis on decontextualized and impersonal language. For example, there will be no use of emotions, very little use of the personal pronoun if the situation is formal and professional or academic. But we tend to involve a lot of emotion in our writing. But that does not mean that the writings which are produced by the outer and expanding circle countries should be rejected, or that they are not worthy of attention by the readers in the inner circle countries. I'm sorry. So what is needed is the acknowledgement that these literary works deserve, and the value, the literary value of the writings, the literary works produced by Asian and African writers should also be acknowledged. And the publishers who bring out these literary works, they need to shed off their prejudices against the English used in the outer and expanding circle countries in other varieties of English except the native varieties, and they should encourage these writers by accepting their work for publishing.